夠開會嘅法定人數。
Members, we have formed a quorum, and it's time to start our meeting. Let's invite the officials to come in.
好，各位請坐下。Please be seated.
Please be seated. In the Legislative Council session 2016-2017, as at the last meeting, we have approved 9 items with a total funding of $21.0181 billion. We'll continue with the outstanding items carried forward from the meeting held on the 10th of May. There are 6 items with a total funding of $56.2436 billion. If these items are approved, the total would increase to 15 items, and total funding will be $77.2617 billion. Setting aside the computer system and the land resumption costs, which will amount to $2.8684 billion. Capital projects funding would be something like $74.3933 billion. May I remind members that in accordance with RP 83A, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please disclose the nature of the interest before you speak. And also please pay attention to RP 84 concerning voting by a member in case of pecuniary interest, direct pecuniary interest. Now, this is 272 RS Kai-Tak Sports Park. Members are invited to upgrade the remaining part of 272 RS entitled Kai-Tak Sports Park Construction Works to Category A, and an estimated cost of $31.898 billion in money of the day prices. Today, for this item, we have a Permanent Secretary for Home Affairs, Mrs. Betty Fung, Commissioner for Sports, Mr. Yang Dak-kyung, and Mr. Linda Law, PAS, and also from Pete Marwick, Mr. Julian Vela, and Mr. Alester Graham, as well as Mr. Michael Camalango.
讓呢個委員提問之前呢，就我知道政府方面呢，亦都想就上
Would like to get a consolidated response to the questions raised at the last meeting by the Permanent Secretary. Yes, we received questions from 7 members raised at the last meeting. I'm sorry that we could only give you a copy of our replies late last evening. Some members are concerned why we have to adopt this DBO approach for the procurement of this project. In the paper, we have set out 9 possible approaches for our procurement. None is better than the other. We are not going for the best, but we are going for the best that suits Hong Kong. Earlier, we ruled out 5 of the 9 possible approaches. Some are commercially not viable. If there is for example, BOT, joint venture, these will involve investment from the private sector in the sports park project. Since this is going to be a community facility, the investor is unlikely to recoup their investment in 20 or 30 years. We have therefore ruled out BOT and JV, and there are also some rather unconventional approaches. For example, separate the three: building, operation, or we can get a contractor for the operation, DO, and then separate that from B, and then we can ask a contractor to go do the design. But this is to our disadvantage. If this is led by the operator, there may be a risk of overspending, and actually no operator can take up this build of $30-odd billion and ask and get a designer to take it forward. So these have been ruled out. So we are left with 4: DBO, DBFO, and that is fundraising by the private sector, tens of billions of dollars, building, and then the government would pay with schedule payment in installments, or some traditional approach: design and build first, and then tender for operation, or design and build, and then the government would be responsible for the operation afterwards. That is like other LCSD facilities. So we have compared these approaches. We consider these approaches on the basis of a certain analysis. For example, the degree of control exercised by the government, whether it would facilitate the organization of a mega event, and would the approach result in a sports park with vibrancy and high usage by our people. Only DBO can fulfill these criteria. DBFO can also give us some degree of control, but not as high as DBO, and the risk is low to medium. If the operation is carried out by the government or by a contractor, well, we have a high degree of control, but the risk is going to be transferred to us. That's why we have gone for DBO. We've also looked at the sharing of commitment. For all the 4 options, the government would have to pay for the construction. For example, DBFO involves unitary payment in installments, not just in relation to construction, but also the financing costs, including interest. In terms of operational costs, only DBO will not involve any expenditure on the part of the government. The other 3, for a 20-year period, in money of the day prices, it will be something like $9 billion to $9.28 billion. So the difference is big. If we construct the sports park and then we ask a contractor to operate, we'll be paying a sum which is much different from that under DBO. Under DBO, we are able to get back a fixed sum, the basic amount. So, having considered all these factors, we believe the procurement approach should be DBO. We don't have to pay anything for operation. In terms of risk transfer and level control, DBO is the best for us. Some members are concerned that this project costing $31.9 billion, and then the bidders would try to get a piece of the action. If you look at the second note in the paper, the Development Bureau has conducted a survey. The marginal profit for a public works project like this is 2 to 3%. So the contractor is going to get a profit of $500 to $800 million. But there is an upfront investment of $300 to $400 million for the procurement of equipment, furniture, other costs involved in the launching of the project, and they have to pay an indemnity for the government to guard against default. So if we compare the investment and the profit, it's not that it's going to be a so-called fat contract that would give contractors a lot of profit. And there's also a need to balance the requirements to be met by the bidder. If we are too draconian in the terms and conditions, we may end up having no bidder or very few bidders. And I can also, of course, invite our consultants to answer members' questions today. All right, no need to supplement. We can now open the floor to members. Let's take a look at the list. Dr. Lau Xiu Lai for the third round, 2 minutes. I have a question for the government. Is that the DBO compared with DB or separating O is a better approach in terms of vibrancy? I asked a similar question last time, but there was no answer. That's why I have to ask this again. Well, we have to get prepared in case of success and also some contingency in case of failure. You have been saying that this sports park project is very complicated. You have to get someone to design and build and operate the sports park. You need to provide the incentives because there are only a few potential bidders in the world. But if the first contractor cannot do a good job in operation, then how can you ask anyone to take over? So instead of DBO, it would be just DB. And how if things become bad, how are you going to get someone to operate the sports park? Because you can't do it. And where are you going to find the next operator? DB and then O is also viable, but we would like to go for DBO, which in our view is better. If in the case described by Dr. Lau, for some reasons the contract is prematurely terminated with the operator, and then how can we handle the aftermath? Well, we can retender the operation. So design, build. You're not answering my question. If it's already in a mess, you will be left with no choice but to accept whatever terms of the next bidder.
Well, by then, we will be tendering out an operation contract. So we will try to find an operator, and internally in the government, we will try to find funding for the operations. We will give the operator a management fee, so it would become a company that's just managing the park. So this will attract people to do that. Maybe you should break up the facility so that there are different operators. As a result, you can have a vibrant park. I think the Permanent Secretary has repeatedly explained herself to you. So let's invite the next speaker to speak, Mr. Kong Chung-yu. I believe the administration understands my position. I really object that $60 million be spent in this way. So how are you going to select four bidders? And also when it comes to the contractual terms, you're saying that this company will have to run it for 25 years, and if it doesn't do a good job, then you will terminate the contract. So that means you will kill it. So before killing it, well, okay, let's say that this consortium works in a perfunctory manner. What would happen? We fear that would happen. So the operator just does it perfunctorily, and it doesn't inject any more money into it. I've seen examples like this. So for example, there's this residential building and management company just doesn't care about the escalator when it malfunctions. So would the government consider this? That is, before the termination of the contract, would you have any contractual terms in place so that the operator won't run the park perfunctorily? Now, there would be about $200 million that they place with us. And if it doesn't work satisfactorily, eventually we can take the money. It's just $200 million, right? It's about the operation cost of 9 months. So for 1 year, it would be $300 million. So after a certain period of time, we will increase that amount. And also there will be penalty. Now we have KPIs and operational demands. If they cannot achieve this, first we will issue a warning, and after several warnings, if there's still no improvements, there can be a fine. This will be included in the contract. How are we going to select the four? Now we are now doing a pre-selection from the 28th of April to the 30th of June, we are inviting companies from all over the world to express their interest. So for this interested consortia, we will select four from them, which we think are of the top quality, and they will enter the second phase. After getting the funding in the latter part of this year, in third quarter, we will do tendering. And for these four consortia, we will let them know about all the conditions and requirements, and then they will come up with the tendering documents. Mr. Editor, my position is that for the large-scale sports ground, I have a lot of reservation because the Hong Kong Stadium already has such functions. Last week, the government gave us a reply, and for the main stadium and the indoor sports center, if they are to be managed by the government, what will be the cost? When I look at the figures, it's not too bad. For these three venues, each year, the government thinks that there would be a surplus of $12 million. So when it's compared with DBO, that's O, and that's a big difference. Just now, the government said that the park should be vibrant. However, if it's run by the government, it will be less vibrant. I do not agree to that. When we talk about vibrancy, the government standard of vibrancy may be different from that of the public. Now, let us look at the theme park. is run by the LCSD, and there are venues which can be rented out. So this is managed by the government. Now, if the government is not too strict when it comes to the management of a venue, then people can be given a lot of freedom there. So Tema Park is a very good example. So my question is, now you've done your calculations. If it's to be run by the government, you can make money. Have you thought about that? If it's operated by the government, will the people have more freedom using this place? Now, if the park is to be run by the government when it's compared with DBO, the surplus has a difference of 10 times. Now, if you talk about $12 million, for DBO is $126 million. We are not most concerned about income. For DBO, we will not pay for the operation, but if the government runs it, the government will need $9 billion to run it for 25 years. Now, for DBO, the government has a high degree of control because it's wholly owned by the government. So in our contractual terms, we will, I hope the Permanent Secretary will tell us this from the people's perspective. If this place is managed by the government, will the public has more freedom using it? She hasn't answered me. I'll ask her to continue to answer you. Yes, please continue. Now we will require the contracted party to manage the park as if it were the LCSD. It should be open 24 hours a day unless it's maintaining some parts of the park. So it's just like people using LCSD venues. It's impossible. You are the government official. You are here to answer us. So as to how the operator runs the place, the operator won't come here to be questioned by us. Can you let the PS answer the question first? Well, you have to be patient. I have been trying to be flexible when it comes to your question time, but you have to give time to the government to answer. This is not time for you to speak, Mr. Lang Kwok-hong. Permanent Secretary. For the future sports park, it's not like the link markets because they are not owned by private entities. We are the owner of the park. We have to be accountable. If LegCo asks us to come here to explain, we will come here together with the contracted party. And the LegCo can set up some monitoring mechanism to monitor the future operation of the park. It's just like LCS. It's just like LegCo monitoring the work of WKCD. Mr. Ray Chen. I've been listening to the government's answers. It seems that the government is at a very disadvantaged position. Well, in the paper, you say that you are worried that there won't be enough bidders. So you are begging people to join this game. So if you impose on them harsh conditions, that won't work. Now, for complicated projects, you have to make a lot of investment up front. So that's why you are trying to provide them with bid incentive. I won't say that I'm totally objecting to that. However, I'm worried that because you want to have more bidders instead of one, so that's why you are providing this bid incentive. But those bidders don't really want to join the game. They just come join it because they want to make the bidding exercise look better. And the three bidders may not really want to run the park. And you are saying that in the middle of this year, the interested parties would have to express their interest, and then you will select 4 bidders. So when they express their interest, they just raise their hands and saying that they want to join the game because you want 4 bidders. So do they have to meet certain requirements? How are you going to vet them? Do you look at the track record, how wealthy the companies are, or what? Or they have to give you some of their conceptual ideas? You said that for operation and design, they have to be done together because the operator may not like the design or would not find a design suitable. So when in the initial stage, can you sit down and talk to them? So if they don't really bid seriously, I think it will be very difficult for them to get the contract. Commissioner? With regard to Mr. Chen's question, he asked that these people are just to join the bidding. They don't really want to run, but they won't gain anything. Now, we would just be giving them part of their tender cost, and there are a lot of limitations. And what about the pre-selection? Now, when they at that stage, they would already have to give us very detailed information, and they need to form a team. That is, when it comes to design, building, and operation, they need to give us very clear information concerning the personnel, their experience. For example, in terms of design and building, do they have professional experience? How many years of experience do they have? So, in our pre-selection documents, this is already stated very clearly. And when it comes to operation, they have to show us evidence that they have operated a sports venue which can accommodate 20,000 people, or they have run a large-scale mall, etc. So they have to meet this criteria. So after getting this pre-qualification documents, we would score the documents in accordance with a set of rules, and then they will enter the second phase. We will start our tendering exercise at the end of this year. So when they get, before they get to give us the tendering documents, they would have to give $5 million as down payment. We want to make sure that the tendering document is up to standard. Otherwise, the $5 million will be confiscated. So there are a lot of strict rules, and they have to meet all the rules before they can enter the second phase. Mr. Chen Chenying, for DBO, it's said that the government would like that option, but for the other two options, there may be certain problems. For example, there may be a risk of cost overrun. So if we adopt DBO, for the contractor that wins the bid, it may try to rush the project in order to meet the rules. For the other two options, and the operators may be able to do better, and the governments may also have more control. So how about reducing the amount under bid incentive so that tenderers can be invited under other options? Now for DBO, there will be no delay and cost overrun. Is that really true? Well, for these two options, we have already eliminated them. Maybe our consultants can explain further.
Not in DB, the DB separate O and the DB government.
Okay. Mr. Graham, your answer this question, or
so this is the D. This is the. Okay, Michael, I think you should tell it. Okay. So I think the issue with the design, operate, build is that you then end up with a team coming together to design and operate, who then start specifying what they want to see in the project, and what they'll want to see is possibly beyond the expectations of government, and we would envisage that cost would go, through the roof, because you would then be building something which an operator, they would want the Rolls-Royce solution. Yeah, that's the first point on that one.
I think if I could just add, I think the benefit of the DBO over those two options is that fundamentally it brings a team together to provide an integrated solution for the park. Design, build and operate. And the design will then be constructed in a way to maximise the opportunity for the operator to achieve your policy objectives. Under 9 and 8, we are basically decoupling the two, which creates some risk on one hand that you will get cost overruns because the design will be such that it will then lead to a cost overrun and you're in a position where you can't retract it, or alternatively a design build is undertaken that does not actually create the right optimal solution for the success of the precinct.
OK， 好啊，秘書長。
大家都會留意到咧，喺9個選項裏邊咧。
Well, we have given you examples for 1 to 7, but we can't find any for number 8 and number 9. So we cannot find no DBO or DOB elsewhere in the world. I believe that there's no bidder for these two options. Yang Ko-hong, 4th round, 1 minute. Well, we're dumping Hong Kong people's money into the sea. I oppose to this sports park right from the beginning. When you sold the assets to the Ling, you promised us that those facilities could be used by the public. And for Lam Tin, people wanted to have a library. How can you now compensate the residents of Lam Tin? Because the Ling object to having a library. You're wasting our money. You're spending tens of billions of dollars on a football pitch, which will be rarely used. If you don't have any tournaments in 9 of the 12 months, would they give you back the cost for the 9 months? And it's costing over $10 billion. And also hotels. Have you consulted athletes? Do you have any question? I don't hear any question from you. All right, if there's no question from Mr. Leung, then Mr. Eddie Chu, 3rd round, 2 minutes. The Permanent Secretary refers to an expenditure of $9.2 billion. Well, it's simply a false argument. On the 4th year after completion, there will be a 12 million surplus for the government, taking into account the expenditure. So you have a surplus even after deducting expenditure. And you're saying that if it's DBO, the surplus is $120 million a year. And you have to share the surplus with another operator. And we are going to invest $30 billion. So $100 million is not much of a profit. If this is managed, invested, an investment of the government and managed by the government, our people would get additional benefits out of it. For example, if this is a public open space owned and operated by the government, then the activities allowed there will cover a wider areas than the premises managed by a private contractor. If I stage a protest in a LCSD facility, can you apply for an injunction to stop me from doing this? But if I go to the Link or the Disneyland, if I do anything that they don't like, they can apply for an injunction order. That's the basic difference. Our people would be able to enjoy the public facility much more. And if this is going to be run by an operator, is it that people's right of access and enjoyment will be curtailed? I think the question is already clear enough. Well, political activities, of course, are not the first thing we want to see there in the sports park. Oh, we can, of course, adopt the LCSD approach. But in the past, there are people criticizing the LCSD for being too strict because we operate the facilities under Cap 132. There are many rules that LCSD has to comply with. In the future, these sports parks would allow us more flexibility. For members concerned, we're going to put into the agreement clear stipulations and provisions to make sure that people's freedom of enjoyment of the facility will not be affected. Mr. Wu Chi-Wai, I have a question. Well, after getting the funding approval from this subcommittee, you need to draw up the tender document. Are you going to come back to tell us what the details are like in the tender document? Or is it that you are not going to come again and we'll have no chance to know what's in the tender document? Mr. Yang, in accordance with the usual practice, tender document is a public document. Are you going to come back? Are you going to give us the tender document so that we can take a look before you issue the document? Well, that's not the usual practice. Well, this is, of course, not the usual practice. DBO is not the usual practice. We are going to set out all the requirements in the tender document, and we will say that there will be KPIs, and we will have to be accountable to LegCo. In other words, for this very special tendering exercise, this council will have no chance to scrutinize the document before you issue it. That's not the usual tender procedure. Ms. Tanya Chen, I want to talk about bid incentive. At the Home Affairs panel meeting, it was not mentioned. It was something you inserted later, and some members expressed strong views against it. I would like to be enlightened in respect of these matters. For example, that they adopt the same bid incentive in Chicago. They will look at the percentage of the contract and the cost. Now we are going to provide $60 million under bid incentive, or half of the cost.
Subcontractors as a percentage of the total contract value. 咁咧佢咧就係按比例嘅，譬如話1至16% 咧。
1.6%, 0.5% of the contract bid incentive. How do you calculate this? Has anyone else adopt this across-the-board approach, that is 60 million or 50% of the cost of entering bids? We estimate that the cost of sending a bid will be $100 to $200 million. We look at the number of man-hours required to prepare a bid. We need professionals to work for a certain number of hours, so the cost is likely to be in the range of $100 to $200 million. Since this is going to be very costly for the bidder, if the incentive is just 10 or 20%, then it will not be attractive to bidders who are very interested in participating in the tendering. I'll ask the consultant to say something.
I mean, there are examples of bid costs being paid in other markets around the world, and we've had a look at those examples. Fundamentally, the purpose of this is to create an environment which maximises the competitive bidding. There are a number of parties that are interested in this project, but it is a complex project for the reasons that have been discussed already, and the bidders will incur significant costs in bidding by having to bring together design, construction and operating plans that will be very detailed and will be assessed. The purpose of the bid cost reimbursement is to enable those parties to actually incur those costs to present the best solutions they can, but there is a requirement, we believe, to provide some recovery of their costs to them to enable them to do that, because it is a very expensive exercise, as has been mentioned.
Thank you very much. 多謝，即係我知道呢個樣嘢。
I understand that. It's the same as what the Permanent Secretary has said. I want to know whether other places are doing this, like Hong Kong. That is the cost of bid preparation, and unlike Chicago, they would take into account the percentage of the work of the bidder in the preparation of the bid. And also, Permanent Secretary talks about man-hour. How do you assess the man-hours worked by different people? There you have to involve different experts, financial assessment, building experts, and so on. Commissioner? The bidder, in submitting a bid, we have to also submit a document on bid incentive. Apart from some amounts, the bidder will have to tell us how the amount is to be shared. For example, if this is a conglomerate, how many companies are involved, and how much is contributed by the different partners, and the information would have to handed in at the same time of the bid. And later on, they will have to tell us the detailed information on man-hour calculation. Vetting would then follow. Mr. Avin Young, 2 minutes, third round. I want to follow up with the previous question raised by Ms. Tanya Chan. I want the Permanent Secretary to explain whether in other countries there is a similar approach in providing a bid incentive like Hong Kong. Well, in the first meeting, we mentioned the New South Wales, the Convention Centre. It was commissioned in 2016. The cost of the project was 8.8 Hong Kong dollars. The bid incentive is $30 million. As a percentage, is higher than our bid incentive. And also Montreal Bridge, the cost is at 23 billion. The bid incentive for the bidders is $58 million. Well, this is new for Hong Kong Public Works, but it's been practiced elsewhere.
Can you disclose more? Just now you cited 2 examples. So eventually, how many bids did they get? This time around, you say that we want at least 4 bidders. So for those 2 examples, can you give us such figures? Maybe I can give them to you later. Now, after adopting the bid incentive, they have successfully awarded a bid to some certain companies. We will show you the information later. Have you looked at this PS? Now, if we do not provide bid incentive this time, how many consortia will be interested in this project? What's the difference with and without the bid incentive when it comes to the number of bidders? Now we are in the pre-qualification stage. There are still a lot of variables, and the interested parties are also looking at bid incentive. We have done a market sounding out. Well, at that time, they didn't think the government will provide a bid incentive, so we think that there are one or two companies that are interested. Now, after we said that we will provide a bid incentive, we have looked at the markets again, and for the number of consortia which are interested is increased. We think at least there 3 or 4 in the market. If there are more than 4, we don't need that. So for a government tendering exercise, 4 bidders is a more ideal situation. Dr. Kwok. Now for that contract, it won't be shown to us, right? You talked about it just now. The answer just now was that we would be able to see the contract. Right? I'm talking about a contract. The contract. Yes? Well, the contract is mainly our tendering documents. It is a public document, and it will be gazetted. So it will be gazetted, but before gazetted, you cannot show it to us. We are still preparing it. This is we are now at the pre-qualification stage. I think this is outrageous. You are afraid that those bidders cannot make money, so you want to give them money. When I read the documents, it is not really a sports project. You want to hold events there. You want the operator to make more money. Well, why don't you just build a venue for performance? Now, in the name of sports, now you want to spend $39 billion and you are going to give such advantages to a bidder, and this successful bidder will make a huge amount of money. Well, for the cruise terminal, it's already a very good example. You spend $8 billion on it, and what has become of the terminal? And the consultant doesn't have to be held responsible. So now the government has to be the gatekeeper. Now, in Hong Kong, do we have sports events that would attract 50,000 spectators? I'm talking about sports events. Well, before Dr. Kwok came in, we already talked about that. In our appendix, we've said that for the $31.9 billion is not only for the contractor party. The profit is just $500 to $800 million. Now, we really need a big sports venue in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Stadium is not enough. This is very clear. So how many sports events would attract over 50,000 spectators, excluding Rugby 7? Now, we have some big football matches every year. I ask you, how many events? Now, if you look at Hong Kong Stadium, of course, we cannot use that as a standard because it has pitch limitations and noise limitations. So other than Rugby 7, there are several big football matches a year that's held at the Hong Kong Stadium. In the future, we will have the retractable roof, and we will also have a flexible turf system. We believe that there will be more mega sports events. This is outrageous because the government cannot give us exact figures. Fernando Chung. Thank you for your supplementary documents. But I'm still quite surprised. But the government thinks that the park should be operated in a commercial manner, and you adopt the DBO math approach, and you think this is better than the government operating the venue. Well, the government shouldn't belittle itself. Well, this is a public policy, but you want to rely on a private consortium and you think this kind of management would be more successful. Now, if you use this as your logic, then the whole government should be contracted out. Now, you want to make sports more popular, to promote sports in the community, but do you have benchmarks for measuring that? How can you be sure that these facilities can be used by the vulnerable groups, for example, people with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and people living in remote areas in Hong Kong? So if you just organize a few mega events, does it mean that you're promoting sports in the community? I think the KPI should be reformulated. I have asked this question several times. Your time is up. Let's ask the PS to answer. Commissioner. Well, for promoting government's policies, both the public and private sectors have their own strengths and they can achieve different things. The government hopes that we can make use of different resources and expertise so that we can achieve the government's policy intentions. Now, for the sports park, sports is the main theme. Now, there are different facilities, but sports should be the priority. Just now you talked about the stadium, the main stadium. Each year there should be at least 16 mega events that are related to sports. As for the public sports ground and the indoor sports center, there should be more events. For the public sports ground, over 90% of the time, this place will be used by the public and schools. So all these events should be totally related to sports. As for the indoor sports center, 2/3 of the events should be related to sports. So for the sports park, most of the events are related to sports. Now we want the private operator to properly run this place with his expertise. On a KPI, on page 3 of the paper, you talked about KPI. And how about management performance and operation performance? Do you have another set of KPI for that? Can you also provide us with the detailed information? Now you will be monitoring its performance, so we want to know what benchmarks you are relying on. And for Mr. Eddie G's questions, you answered about the Wan Chai sports ground. Well, we've heard that after the Kaitek Sports Park is commissioned, the Hong Kong Stadium will be converted and there will be field and tracks. So for major field and tracks events that were originally held at Wan Chai sports ground, they will be moved to the Hong Kong Stadium. So do you have such a plan? And also for that 15 sports and leisure facilities, you are going to conduct technical feasibility studies. For the 26 projects that are covered by the policy address, you even included a harbourfront enhancement projects. So for these 15 projects, can you give me further information? For the KPI, on the 4th of May, we submitted a paper to PWSC and we set out all the operation requirements and the major KPIs. Dr. Fernando Chung wanted us to compare this to promoting sports in the community, etc. So that's why we gave you another paper. When we study the Kaitek Sports park at that time, we were not thinking about the Wan Chai Sports Ground renovation. It was only included in the 2017 policy address. So at that time, only Hong Kong Stadium had similar functions. So for the 15 items that we mentioned, one of the items was to look at the future positioning of Hong Kong Stadium and how it can be better used by the public, because now it cannot be used by the public. In the future, when we have Kai Tak Sports Park, shall we open Hong Kong Stadium for public use? As for Wan Chai Sports Ground, the TDC is still conducting a technical feasibility study. So at the moment, we are not taking that into consideration. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Well, the sports sector really hope that this sports park can be built as soon as possible. And in principle, I support it. However, there are still a lot of disputes that have not been resolved. I asked many questions before, and now I would like to make 4 suggestions. And I hope that the government would agree. First, for bid incentive, it is something new in Hong Kong. I can't say whether it's good or bad. This is a huge project, and now there are a lot of disputes. I hope the government can give up this idea of giving $60 million. Should be, you should follow traditional approaches this time around. Can you tell LegCo this? You have such confidence in the project and you are sure there will not be cost overrun. So can you cap it and we won't come back for further funding? Can you promise us? And we want a contractor to work efficiently. So for the guarantee amount, I think it should be increased. For example, the funding should be enough for 2 to 3 years operation, and also KPIs should be set very clearly. How many events should be organized a year, and if this cannot be done, there should be penalty. Please respond to these 4 requests. Well, some requests have already been made by other members, but I ask the PS to answer. As for cost overrun, whether we need to seek additional funding from LegCo, at the moment we do not see the need. I have explained several times. For the $31.9 billion, $8.1 billion is for price adjustment and $2.3 billion contingency funds. So in the 3rd quarter of this year, we will do the tendering, and we believe that it will be about $27 billion. So we are quite confident that this amount will be enough. If we do not have enough bids and the prices are high, then we may have to reconsider the details of the facilities. As for penalties, there are different penalties coping with different situations. As for the guarantee fund, we asked them to give us about $200 million as guarantee fund. When it's compared with their profit, it's already quite a big amount. And they also have to invest upfront with $300 to $400 million. But of course, we will go back and do very detailed calculation. And we will put this in the tendering document. As for the bid incentive, we have repeated many times. Without the bid incentive, we are afraid that we would only get a very small amount of bid coming back. So in the coming month, we will look at this again detailedly, but we really hope that we can provide a bid incentive to interested consortia so that they can give us their suggestions as soon as possible.
1分鐘。
Mr. Kwong Chun Yu, 4th round, 1 minute. Are you trying to get more bidders by offering the bid incentive? But these bidders are just going to take part and not going to be awarded the contract? How many consortium have indicated interest to enter a bid? And also, you have $200 million as indemnity. I was concerned that the operator would just do a sloppy job. Look at Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. So you can hold on to the $200 million and make sure that the operator do a good job, but the amount is not really big. So are you going to attract more bids just for the sake of increasing the number of bids received? We have organized a briefing session. The response was very good, but there were questions concerning the offering of bid incentive. We know some consorts here will not be interested if there's no bid incentive. They have to spend $100 million to $200 million in preparing a bid. There will be no incentive to be involved if no bid incentive. We're not trying to get the so-called also rents. We want to get as many bids. The maximum is 60 million, or half of the cost. So I would like to have 4 bidders from which we can choose the best one. Ms. Tanya Chan, third round, 2 minutes, 2 questions. There's the sum of 8.1 billion for price adjustment and 2 billion plus for contingencies. What if the sum is not fully spent? What about potential risk involved? Look at West Kowloon Cultural District. And they have been coming back to ask for more, costing $20 to $30 billion. So if we give you $30 billion this time, are you going to come back to ask for more for other public facilities? I'm not talking about this project. You may have another bill that we will be asked to settle in the future. We have already secured $62 million from this council for the advance preparation. And this 30-odd billion will be for the DBO. And apart from the life cycle provisions, there will be nothing. Then we need to seek additional funding. Well, if there's any contingency money unspent, what? It's not an unspent amount. It's just that there's no contingency to meet. Will the money go back to the treasury if you do not spend all, Commissioner? This is the usual practice for public works project. After securing funding approval from this council, if the bid prices are lower than the APE, well, it's done on a reimbursement basis, and that is the money not spent remains in the treasury. Ms. Chu Hoi Dek, I hope the Bureau will not continue to tremble LCSD. If you continue to do that, then I'm afraid that one day you would contract out the operation of Victoria Park to a private operator. According to the government's own calculation, if these 3 facilities are run by the government, you can still enjoy a surplus. If we adopt the DBG approach, then the tendering for DB would the government be able to attract more bidders for the DB tendering, and then there's no need to offer the bid incentive. Permanent Secretary, as the formal director of LCSD. I'm not going to belittle LCSD, but LCSD simply do not have the expertise to run the facility with so much commercial elements. If we adopt the DG approach, we are going the expenditure on the part of the government is the same, 31.9 billion. The bidders do not have to be responsible for operation, so they may enter a lower bid. So in terms of level of control and the transfer of risk and vibrancy and revenue for the sports ground, our objectives will not be able to be achieved. When there are more bidders, then there's a lower need for offering bid incentive. Is that the case, Permanent Secretary? If we adopt the traditional DB approach, the tender document preparation is the same. This is a big project. The site is 28 hectares, involving complicated design work. And we have to consider whether the procurement arrangement is appropriate. It's not just about the cost. The construction cost will be the same, whether it's DBO or DB. The construction will still be costing the same. It's a same budget, $31.9 billion. Dr. Kwok-Kake, or not here? Mr. Ho Kai-ming, first round, 4 minutes. As a sport fan, I am sad to see the miserable condition the Hong Kong Stadium is in. Some years ago, when Manchester United came to Hong Kong, well, the pitch was so messy. Well, it's carried by the international media that Hong Kong did so poorly in offering a sports facility for visitors. We have discussed the not so satisfactory system of inspection by the Labour Department when new projects are carried out. For example, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, a lot of work is carried out at a height, and we have seen many accidents. So how can you ensure that the construction lives up to the higher standard in terms of safety? And of course, there's no need to guarantee a profit during the construction phase. If you look at Wembley, they lost 700 in building the multiplex. If you have earmarked a contingency fund of 8.1 billion, can you assure us that you won't come back for more? Well, there's no need to guarantee a profit. If they make break even, that would already be good enough. So can you promise us that there will be no attempt to ask for more later? Or we want to have a new stadium? Hong Kong Stadium is clearly unable to meet the needs for mega events. Every year we receive offers from overseas sports teams for the inspection of work safety. We'll talk to the Labour Department. And third question is, do we want to guarantee the contractor to have a profit? No, that's not the case. We have conducted a survey of past public works project and the marginal profit is 2 to 3%. The bidder will have to consider the risk that he will shoulder, and also if there's a profit, how much will be gained. If he does it wrongly, the risk is on him. In accordance with the normal practice of public works project, we have a 5% contingency for price adjustment purposes on the basis of inflation. It's $8 billion. How much? What would the daily fine if the contractor fails to deliver on time? Well, this will be in the contract. How much? Well, you know, in the UK, the daily fine is £140,000. We have to talk to the Development Bureau and the lawyers of the Department of Justice. Generally speaking, if a contractor defaults and fails to deliver the project in time, there will be penalties. Well, they are preparing the tender document. All these suggestions will be considered during that stage. Mr. Michael Tin. Well, you can improve the three arrangements, and then you can have my vote. As I said last time, you don't need to provide a guarantee. In a tendering exercise, the guarantee amount should be accorded the priority. It should have a weighting of 30%. At least 2 to 1 in weighting. And also the so-called breakup fee is totally unacceptable. They want to use the DBO approach, design, build and operate. The contractor is responsible for the design, the building, and the operation. So they cannot bring other people if there are problems. We'll spend tens of billions of dollars, give the contractor a very prime site, and then if they don't do a good job, they see no prospects, they can just give you $100 to $200 million and leave. And the next operator will say that the design is problematic and there are problems of different sorts. I think they should at least provide indemnity of 5% of the total cost. I think it should be linked to the $200 billion we are going to spend. We're going to entrust everything to the contractor. There must be something to ensure delivery. If there's no such a guarantee or the breakup fee is not meaningful, and also you should shorten the contractual period. I think my time is running out. I'll explain later. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Tin mentions 3 points which we are looking into. On a number of occasions, he has stressed that the percentage of the guarantee should be higher than the sharing percentage. We're still looking into the marking scheme, and we need to secure the agreement of the Central Tendering Board. We cannot give you the marking scheme at this stage. We'll seriously consider Mr. Tin's suggestion. The guarantee will be the guarantee percentage will be higher than the revenue sharing or surplus sharing percentage. We believe the marginal profit for the contractor is just 2 to 3%. According to the Development Bureau, the profit is likely to be in the range of $500 to $800 million. If we ask for indemnity money of more than $1 billion, that would mean that it's higher than the potential profit. But we can adopt other approaches. For example, guarantee schemes, corporate guarantee schemes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I would defer my comments to next round.
We will look into all these options. What we want to keep most is the parent company. And for the contract length of 25 years, the first 5 years for building and 20 years for operation, can there be a midterm review? In different contracts, there are such requirements. But of course, after the review, if the performance is satisfactory, of course, we want to continue with the cooperation. But we will continue to look into it. Mr. Wuchiwai, Mr. Holden Chow. Mr. Holden Chow. Chairman, just now you talked about different options. And there will be 20 years of operation, and there may be a midterm review. I think members would find this necessary because you need to monitor the performance of the operator all the time. Now, if there is a midterm review, we don't know whether it will be done every 5 years or 10 years. So if there are midterm reviews, and if the performance is really not up to par, what would happen? Would you fire it? And what are the conditions of firing the contracted party? If its performance not good and you want to remove this contracted party, do you have to make compensation to it? Would it be like that? We want clear information. Now, if it cannot achieve the requirements, you can remove it. But what conditions will there be? Will you have to make compensations? Mr. Chow, I think your questions are very clear already. I think similar questions have been answered. P.S. Now, when there is a review, there are outcomes. If the performances are not good, if we cannot continue with the cooperation, then in the contract we already have included termination clauses. If the responsibility lies with the contracting party, there will not be any compensation, and they may even have to be penalized. This is very clear. And maybe under certain circumstances, we end the contract with mutual consent. Mr. Wu Chiwai, 1 minute. Now for the sports park, there will be about 60,000 square meters of commercial area, and it's between 2 MTR stations. As the government assess this, for this 60,000 square meters of commercial area, what's the market rental rate? The rental value. Later on, I'll ask the consultant to answer this. Well, we have submitted you with a paper concerning financial arrangement. Maybe the consultants can tell you that it has looked at neighboring countries.
Mr. Graham?
Yeah, so we have, as part of our team, we've appointed specialist real estate retail consultants who have looked at, an average rental rate is a mix of, the different mix of whether it's food and beverage, whether it's common retail, whether it's, so it varies. So a detailed study was done on that location, as you say, between 2 metro stations, the amount of retail that is in the project, and I think we should supply the number. It's around 800 square per square meter on average. So it's been benchmarked against similar locations and similar mixes.
Now, why do I ask you this question? You have to understand this. 60,000 square meters. If we just look at the premium is $12 billion. Well, maybe it would be less because there may be many stories. However, for the premium price of this site, it is still very valuable. This is a huge amount. And now the government has to build all this. What if the price is not attractive to the commercial world? I'm surprised about this. Your time is up. Please press the button again. Mr. Michael Chen, 1 minute. Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad that the PS told me about the increased guarantee ratio and also for the so-called breaking up fee. Now for indemnity, they have to give you cash. As for breaking up fee, it can be set at a higher level. As the PS said, corporate guarantee will also do. So for these companies that come for bidding, they must have very track record. It's huge companies with parent companies and subsidiaries. So corporate guarantee can be accepted. So after 5 years, if there are problems and if they just operate for 2 years and give it back to you, then it's really unacceptable. Last time I talked about the contract length, 15 plus 10, etc. Now, if there is a very high breaking up fee, they do not want 25 years. They may want to quit earlier. P.S. For the indemnity level, etc., we'll go back and think about it again. Well, the profits would be about $500 to $800 million, and if they are asked to pay a huge amount as guarantee, then it may deter consortia from bidding. Now, do we want them to finish the contract? Well, this is a 25-year contract. Of course, we hope that they can complete it. It's satisfactory. We hope that they can be there for 25 years. And if we are willing to extend, and that will be a 10-year extension. Now, for the sports park, when the environment development gets better and better, the income will be bigger. So the carrot is there in the future. So for the initial 5 to 7 years, it may not be making money, or it may be making less money than its original investment. So it's the carrot and stick, and the carrot is further in the future. Mr. Lau Kwok Hong, 1 minute. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan has set 4 conditions. And the government doesn't answer that. They say they just go back and look at it. And Michael Tian seems to have huge vision. After voting, it's difficult to reach you by calling you. Well, when some people praise you, you just feel great, right? I think you are running G2000 very successfully. It's just not, well, I will be moving an adjournment motion now because there are more and more questions, and we are getting wiser and wiser. The consultants are here to act as consultants. They are insulting us. They are insulting our wisdom. Well, you're consultants. No matter what happens to this project, you have made your money already. Do you want to invest in this project? Mr. Lau Kwok Hong, in accordance with our rules, with our Rule 33, is moving an adjournment motion. And according to paragraph 33, members can speak on this motion. Every member will be given 3 minutes. Mr. Lau Kwok Hong, if other members would like to speak on the adjournment motion, please also press the button. I hope that the consultants would also provide guarantee funds. Well, what if the project suffers a cost overrun? Now, you are insulting our wisdom. And it's like peeling an onion when we ask you questions. Well, it seems that the world is run by consultants now, but all the financial crises are also caused in this way. For example, Goldman Sachs with the derivatives, and it has to be saved by the U.S. government. All of you are like this. You can't reason with us, and then you tell us there's no time. For the cruise terminal, it was built in a rush, and now it has become a monster. Who's going to give us compensation? Who was the consultant of the cruise terminal? Who's going to make compensation to Hong Kong people? We're not just talking about money. How about land? How about maintenance? You just know how to talk. And when we speak more, you say we are filibustering. I ask you. Now I ask you. Will you die if you don't build this grand sports ground? Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, you should be speaking on your adjournment motion. I'm now asking them questions. What if we do not build this stadium? We don't need a huge banquet. Just give us an ordinary meal. You won't die without building these luxurious venues, right? How many people would visit this place? Look at the people flow there first. Now, you always want to make money. In the past, you told people that there will definitely be profits, and now you're afraid that the bidders won't come, so you have to give them money up front. So what's happening to the cruise terminal? The Highways Department now suggests that light rail should be built to connect the cruise terminal, but this has always failed in other countries. I think you should be more dignified. We are talking about huge cost overrun. And you always come here for funding application, and if we don't approve it, you accuse us of filibustering. What if you don't build these facilities? We don't need these huge facilities. Then we will give you the funds. I hope the Pan-Democrats will come to the meeting. Now, what have you done? Did you object to the building of the cruise terminal? I myself objected to it. Now, for this 3 minutes, you should be speaking on Mr. Leung Kwok Hong's adjournment motion. You should tell us whether you support or object to this motion. Now, if you want to ask the government questions, you shouldn't move this motion. Ms. Lau Siu Lai. I speak in support of Mr. Leung Kwok Hong's adjournment motion. For this whole project, I think the government is not prudent. Now you are just too aggressive, and this may become another Disneyland. So for consultants like this, they are just showing us grand illusions, and they just ask us to believe that this will come true. But what are you doing? Yes, I support sports, and I support elite sports. I don't mind Hong Kong having more mega venues. However, how come everything is put here? It's for commercial purpose, it's for promoting sports, and for sports you want to promote in the community to support elite sports, and there should be international sports events, and so nobody knows how to do it, so it's super complicated, and there will be very few bidders. And LCSD doesn't have any experience and knowledge. That's set by the PS to manage this. So that's why it has to be managed by others. And for the investor or bidder, how can you trust that it can do a good job, even though it doesn't mean to? Well, we need venues up to international standards. So if you put everything here, how can you assure that it can be run successfully? And if not, we cannot take over because the government does not have the expertise, and it's very difficult to find another company to take it over. And then the management fee will have to go down because you need to find another manager. It's because you are overly aggressive. This is a prime site, and we are talking about so many hectares, but you are trying to do a project that is out of your control. So can we start afresh? Can we cut it up? We need facilities for our communities. If you want mega venue, you really have to rethink whether it's feasible building it here. It has to be kept under control. And you also need to train the CSD staff so that they will be able to manage venues like this. Now, you are always contracting this out, and eventually the operators may be out of your control, and once you started the project, you can't stop, and you have to give them more money to back them to stay.
Why
do we want to continue like this? This has happened again and again. Well, I'm in support of the motion to adjourn the meeting. The government should reconsider breaking up this big contract into smaller ones. Dr. Fernando Chung. We in particular are against the big stadium idea. We have a Hong Kong stadium. It's not well managed because of some pre-existing constraints. And then the DAB members suggested here that since that other stadium is not good, let's have another one. We're going to use it for major events for just 10 odd days in a year. And the DBO approach is a cause for concern. You are going to have a commercial party doing both the design, building, and operate. You know, the offering of VIP boxes would ensure bigger profits. And of course, the operator would go for bigger profit. Should there be one more VIP box? Or should there be some space for wheelchair users? Of course, the choice is obvious for the operator. If we have a contractor like that, and since this is a sports park funded by our money, and then we hand it over to someone who's interested in making a profit for 25 years. How can we make sure that the public interest is fully taken on board in the operation? So I have been asking questions about the KPIs. How can you make sure that the facilities there are accessible by all, including the disabled and the disadvantaged? And as things stand, I believe the contractor will concentrate on profitable programs. Look at the cruise terminal. If there's no profit, there's no interest on the part of the contractor to promote public use and public accessibility. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Well, the more we ask, the more questions there are. Look at these three parts. Most will be in the indoor multi-purpose building. To me, it's just a thematic shopping mall. 57 square meters of space, like the Hollywood Plaza. Operators of shopping malls know what to do. Well, this is just another major thematic shopping facility. But the main stadium is another issue. We may be able to host activities such as concerts. But this is supposed to be a sports stadium. If a sports event are the main feature, we have very little potential bidders. Now you want to cover everything in one arrangement. The management contract cannot really focus on addressing problems of the main stadium because there are other things to take care of. I hope that through the German motion, government departments should reconsider the project and also whether you should lump everything into this DBO arrangement. Actually, the design part is more or less decided at the outset. And now that we lump other things into the same contract, costing us $31.9 billion. So the government should reconsider whether the one contract should cover so many things. Mr. Michael Tin, I'm against the German motion because I support this project. We've wasted a lot of times. We call ourselves an international city, and then there are so many constraints imposed on the Hong Kong Stadium. Traffic is terrible, and people are so unhappy. And the design was faulty. There was the noise problem. We need another major venue for sports and other events. We should organize more mega events in Hong Kong, in my view. Some members think that we should have different types of mega events. Well, I beg to differ. Whether it's a performance or it's a competition, the marketing is done in similar fashions across the globe. How can we attract people? Air traffic and visitors and attractions should be considered to promote our economy and our tourism sector. Some members are concerned about the balance between mega events vis-à-vis LCSD activities. As I've suggested, we should have a multi-purpose racing track. Well, I've been approached by many enthusiastic racers. We can make it a rule. We can share the event days for races and for other events such as cycling, as long as you can provide clear provisions in the agreement. This particular project will certainly good in promoting tourism. But when this is submitted to the Finance Committee, I only support it with 3 conditions, such as the bigger guarantee money should be required, and also the contract period should be shorter. If there's no profit to make, no one will be interested in doing a good job for you as a contractor. Mr. Chu Hai-ting. We want to adjourn the meeting so that the Bureau, the Home Affairs Bureau, can carefully consider our views. I have a grave doubts about relying on a major infrastructure project to promote whatever we want to promote. It's said that through commercialization of a sports event, we can develop our economy. Well, but we have to look at the sports environment. Are there industrial chains of different stakeholders? We're going to spend more than $30 billion on this sports ground, and the main stadium is not to be used for sports, as Dr. Kwok Ka-Kee has said. And you're going to invite, say, Real Madrid to Hong Kong for a match. Is that what the sports community want? In an RTHK TV program, many elite athletes have complained about the lack of proper training facilities. Mr. Lau Kok Fan should pay attention to the other existing sports facilities for our athletes instead of just concentrating on new ones. And people of Hong Kong now know that we should have DBG instead of DBO, and there's still a surplus, some return. And what is the merit, what is the advantage of DBG? We are going to have a 20-odd hectares of site, which is a public open space for different people to use. That's a huge public interest, although it's not tangible. I'm going to oppose to this application unless it's turned into a DBG project. Mr. Lau Kok Fan, I oppose to the German motion, but very soon we are going to adjourn anyway, so that would allow some time for the government to consider our views. I will use my 3 minutes to ask the government to consider the 4 conditions that I proposed. That would help to take the matter forward. I've talked to some other members. We may not agree with each other entirely, but generally they support the idea of building this Kai-Tak Sports Park. And I certainly agree with Mr. Michael Tin that we should not procrastinate anymore. We should stay focused and do something in the provision of hardware and venues, and through the introduction of commercial practices, we can promote sports in Hong Kong.
Well, the government should make things clearer in the tendering documents so as to ensure that this can be run smoothly. The link is not doing a good job, but originally it was not a bad idea, but the conditions and terms were not set well, so there were a lot of problems afterwards. So the contractual terms have to be made very clear. I would like to repeat my 4 points. Now, the government has told us about other countries' experiences in bid incentive, but this is new to Hong Kong. And for the Kai Sports Park is a huge project. And you are providing a bid incentive of $60 million. People may think it's really too high. This has never been done in Hong Kong. If the government thinks the sports park is so attractive, I think it should also be attractive to bidders. So why don't we adopt the traditional approach? The government has to tell us clearly what the penalties are like and how you can make sure the future operation is up to your expectations. You are drawing a very beautiful picture, but we hope that these can really be realized. Mr. Kwong Chun-yu, I support the adjournment motion. I hope the government will listen to our views. Well, I've been querying about this $60 million. It's too big an incentive. You say no, you want to attract quality bidders. Okay, your logic is like this. The $60 million is not really such a big attraction, is just to subsidize the hard work. So you are just asking other bidders to join the game, and well, they hope that they won't be the successful bidder because then they can get the $60 million. As for the successful bidder, it would have to worry about the 25 years that's coming. And according to the contract, if the performance is really poor, then you can terminate the contract. So maybe 10 or 20 years later, when you want to terminate the contract, you have a lot of worries. How can you make sure that the venues are taken over by another capable operator? So there are a lot of problems. And just now you talk about the $200 million. Now, if I just want to do my job perfunctorily, then this is not too big a price. So in the course of questioning, you will discover more and more problems. I am very worried that this bid incentive will set a precedent in the future. When there are other similar government projects, you will do the same thing, and you will cite the Kai Tak Sports Park as a precedent. I want to stress once again, this is not appropriate. You are giving unsuccessful bidders public money. And there are a lot of controversies here. Well, the unsuccessful bidder may be very happy with this bid incentive, and yet the successful bidder would have to worry about the 25 years operation. So in the tendering documents, you have to put in something so that the government and the electrical would have the power to monitor the future operator. I hope you can listen to our views. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki. For the members who are sitting here, including me, support sports. However, we don't accept the model. I don't want to guess whether the consultants are just listening to the government. I didn't do a proper job. I'm just worried for the taxpayers. We are talking about $31.8 billion. We have learned a lot of hard lessons at LegCo. Well, the cruise terminal is a very good example. The government asked us for funding, and it told LegCo that it will definitely be a very good terminal. However, a lot of problems have happened. If you adopt the BDO approach, the bill will be paid by the public. And you sign a contract of 25 years, you say that the operator will just make a profit of 2%, so it's not too attractive. Now, if you compete with the business sector, do you think you are smarter than them? The government has been cheated by consortia in the past. And in the past, the government has also entered into joint ventures with the private sector, for example, the Asia World Expo. But this is new. The operator doesn't have to pay much. And what's the indemnity? Just 9 to 10 months worth of operating cost. And if it doesn't do a good job, it can just quit. Of course, we don't want to see that. We are worried that in the name of sport, this will eventually be turned into a mega event venue. Now, even if an event can attract 50,000 people, are you sure this will happen? We have seen examples cited by you, huge concerts in Tokyo and Beijing. But if you want to promote sports, this is not something you are after. The government is dreaming. It wants to become the capital of mega events and catering. Well, you are not doing a proper job if you want to promote sports, and I can absolutely not accept the DBO approach. Mr. Ray Chen, you said that if we have a lot of questions, we shouldn't move an adjournment motion. We should continue to ask. Well, for members who object to this project, they have a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we do not have time. We only have 1 minute left. We can't even describe our idea properly. And Mr. Lau Kwok-fan understands that. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong is putting forward this adjournment motion, and in return we have more time to express our views. So just now, Michael Chen and Lau Kwok-fan make the best use of the 3 minutes. Well, the chairman says that we are not having new information, so how come we have new questions? Now, for this supplementary paper, it was submitted to us during our discussions, and now the whole team of consultants will have to come here to answer our questions. So I think more time should be given to us. Of course, the chairman has been quite lenient when it comes to time control, but we haven't even started to ask questions about engineering works. I want to ask about the acoustic retractable roof and the acoustic double doors. Would they really work? And I'm also very concerned about toilets. Do we have unisex toilets? Do we have unisex changing rooms? We haven't even started to ask such questions. The government is responsible for this. As for the new documents, there's a comparison of the pros and cons of different options, and examples are cited. So I want to talk to you about this table. For the government's degree of control, yes, of course, that should be high. And for risk transfer, I want to talk to you about this. Risk transfer during operation. Why should there be a transfer? Now you can find a consultant and then you can ask the consultant to look at all the risk of the government-run facilities. But we don't have time to discuss all this. Just now, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong criticized the consultant, but the consultant would just do things according to the client's requirements. So the consultants would tailor-made something to the government that the government wants. Well, Chairman, ever since I've been a member of the PWSC, for every project there were different views. Different stakeholders may put forward different reasons which sound right. So the issue we are facing here is whether the 50,000 seat stadium should be built and whether the whole sports park should be built. So either yes or no, even though we don't do anything. And if we just build a central Kowloon Park there with a big piece of lawn, then it will also be welcomed by the people. Many members said that they support the construction of these sports facilities. However, they are not happy with the tendering method. If that is the case, then maybe you can put forward your suggestions. Just now, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan suggested 4 options. So I think this is the more positive way of doing things. You can't just say that you object to everything and you refuse to discuss the relevant problems. This is not good for the long-term development of Hong Kong. So I object to the adjournment motion put forward by Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Mr. Lam Kin Fong, I will give you 1 minute because our time is almost up. Chairman, well, it's been really eye-opening with these meetings. Well, let me talk about the SAR positioning. Now, we, of course, are a financial center, but we also need exhibition space, convention space, sports facilities, etc. Well, many mega events would be touring around different cities, but in Hong Kong, we do not have adequate venues for them. So that's why they just skipped Hong Kong. When it comes to management, some people criticize that the LCSD is not doing a good job. Well, if you have enough resources and manpower, I believe you can do it. Now, take WCK as an example. It has employed a huge team, and they are spending a lot of money, and now you are outsourcing the management. Well, time is up. And now you want to adjourn the meeting. I think it's a waste of time. I don't support it. Only 30 seconds are left. We have to end this meeting by 10:30. So we are not voting on the adjournment motion because time is up. As for the next meeting, is this Saturday, 9 a.m. Thank you.